Some words aren't meant to be heard. They are born to break a person. That night, after 10 years returning from Qatar, my granddaughter lifted her head, her eyes wide and sad like the Bayfield winter sky, and whispered a sentence a 4-year-old child should never have to know. Daddy Damien said Mommy is a slave, and even treated my daughter like a lunatic. No sleepless night in the woodshop had ever hurt me the way that sentence did. My daughter, the one I had spent a whole decade trying to give a home, was called the cruelest word a man could throw at his own woman. And in that moment, I knew my family had been chained by something heavier than iron, the venomous words spoken right in front of a child. If you've ever seen a woman tormented by words, or ever had to stand up to protect the one you love, leave a single, so I know you're still here. And if you want to stay with me through the stories where justice comes late, but surely comes, where silence at the right moment can tear open a whole room full of pretense, hit follow and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening to me. Bayfield, at the end of January, always has a cold of its own. Not the skin-cutting cold of the San Juan Range, nor the bone-dry cold of the eastern plains. It is a cold with a bit of moisture, a bit of stillness, as if the entire town is soaking in a thin layer of mist drifting low across Vallecito Lake. I looked through the fogged-up window of the SUV I had rented at Durango La Plata Airport, my hand still carrying the habit of wiping sweat along my nose bridge. A habit from the days working under the blinding white sun of Qatar, 10 years standing in the desert, building each solar power station, saving every paycheck, every overtime, every project bonus. During that time, I gathered about $1.4 million, enough to reassure myself that I did not leave my homeland only to return empty-handed. 10 years of sending money home regularly to make sure my daughter, Lily Marlowe, would never have to worry about a place to live. I bought the 2-story wooden house at 1120 Mill Creek Ridge in the spring when Lily was 22, hand-picking each piece of red pine lumber from my friend's old mill. I wanted that place to be a solid home for her, and later for my granddaughter, Mia. I had only one plan when returning to Bayfield this time: stand at the door, press the bell, and when Lily opened it, I would spread my arms and say the sentence I had held in my throat for 10 full years. Dad's home. I imagined her face lighting up, imagined Mia's laughter when she saw her grandpa in the flesh, instead of through video calls that kept flickering because of a weak connection back in Qatar. And when standing on Mill Creek Ridge, I remembered the winter mornings when Lily was only 6, her face red from the cold, but still insisting on following me to the backyard to start the fire. She was tiny in that puffy coat, hands held out to catch the wood chips I split, always asking, "Daddy, when will I be as strong as you?" Or those summer afternoons when I carried her on my shoulders along the shore of Vallecito Lake, listening to her sing the silly songs she made up. Then she would wrap her arms around my neck and say, "Daddy, don't go far, okay?" Those memories, that tiny hug, that little hand holding onto my thumb, were what kept me alive through the long years in the Qatar desert, among scorching metal constructions and nights when the sand wind could burn your eyelids. I thought that on the day of my return, I would only need to stand at the door, and she would run to hug me like she used to. I thought the love from back then would still be here, intact, but life never operates by what we hold in our hearts, which never follow the fantasies we cling to. The SUV turned onto the familiar road. Snow covered both sides like soft white wool, each yellow porch light from the neighbors spilling over the fine, drifting sleet. I stopped the car in front of my wooden house, or rather what I had thought was mine, and suddenly felt my chest sink. The corner of the yard where Lily once planted chrysanthemums was now just patchy dirt. The curtains I once chose with her had been replaced with heavy dark ones, looking no different from warehouse drapes. The porch light was no longer the warm yellow glow, but a harsh, cold white. The house had lost its soul. I stepped onto the porch, the cold seeping through my jeans as if trying to clamp around my knees. I turned the key. The lock still made that familiar click I'd heard 100 times, a sound that made me feel like I was still stepping into my own home, into the place where Lily used to call, "Dad, I'm home," and Mia babbled her first little sounds. But when the door cracked open, what I heard wasn't a greeting. It was a shout. "If you drop something again, you'll see what I'll do to you." A man's voice, low, furious, a voice that did not belong to me. I froze. I recognized that voice. It was Damien Caldwell, Lily's husband. I stepped one more foot inside, and the sight before me made the blood in my veins go cold, then boil at the same time. Lily, my daughter, was kneeling on the kitchen floor. Her hands were trembling as she gathered pieces of a broken bowl, her fingers cut and bleeding, yet she kept picking them up with bare hands, as if afraid that being 1 second slower would earn her an hour-long punishment. She was wearing a filthy apron, ash gray, and the bold printed words hit my eyes like a slap. Caldwell Household Property. My heart felt like someone had struck it with a hammer. No one, I emphasize, no one has the right to make my daughter wear that. No one is allowed to call Lily, the girl who once outperformed me in school, who was stronger than many men I'd met on Qatar work sites. Property. Damien stood a few steps away. His hand held a beer bottle, his face flushed, his eyes cold like Lily was an object in the house, not his wife. Suddenly he noticed my presence, and he turned toward me quickly. A forced smile appeared instantly, a veneer of civility thrown over his animal face like a thin curtain. "Oh, Ethan, father-in-law, you're back. What a surprise." His voice softened immediately, overly polite, the kind of softness from someone far too used to wearing a mask the moment an outsider appears. Lily startled, hurried to her feet, wiped both hands on the apron, and pushed it behind a chair. She tried to smile, but it was so weak that I could see the fear inside it, like the eyes of someone who has lived too long in the dark, to the point where light itself feels more terrifying. "Dad," Lily whispered, I'm fine. Damien I dropped a bowl." She forced out the words, her voice small as if fearing even her breath might cause trouble. Damien cut in immediately, raising both hands like someone trying to appear innocent. "Hey, Ethan, don't misunderstand. You know, that bowl was from my mom's wedding gift set, sent up from Texas. A kind that's no longer made. I just got a little loud because Lily was careless. This house has a lot going on, fragile things, kids running around. I just want everything tidy." He smiled a slick smile, the kind that thinks a few smooth words can erase the moment he was towering over his wife like she was some maid in the house. I hadn't even replied when a tiny voice behind Lily sounded, "Mommy, who is that?" The small voice came from behind her legs. I crouched down. A little girl about 4 with brown curls falling in soft ringlets, big dark brown eyes, was half hiding behind her mother's leg, clinging to her pant leg like it was the last lifeline. That was Mia, my biological granddaughter, the child I had only seen through a phone screen for 10 years, flickering between rushed video calls from Qatar. I had imagined that the day we met, she would run to me, call Grandpa, like in the times she practiced saying it to me through the screen. But instead, she looked up, stared at me for a long moment, then whispered, shy and uncertain, "Mommy, who is that man?" Not Grandpa. To her, I was just a strange adult walking into the house. That gentle question to anyone else might sound ordinary, but to me, it stabbed straight into my chest, sharper than the scorching Middle Eastern sun that once burned my skin during those years in Qatar. Turns out, my 10-year absence wasn't just a number on a calendar. It was long enough to turn a grandfather into a stranger in the very house I bought for my child. I swallowed the tightness in my throat, forced my mouth into the kindest smile I could manage, then slowly knelt to her eye level. "Hello, sweetheart," I said gently, slowly. "I'm your grandpa, Ethan. I came from far away to see you." Mia took another step back, hiding her face against her mother's thigh. Lily placed a hand on her head, her eyes pleading with me not to push the child right now. I stood looking long at the kitchen, at Lily's lowered eyes, at the broken dishes, at the apron stuffed hurriedly behind the chair. The house I built to protect my daughter had become the cage trapping her. And in just a few minutes at the doorway, I understood one thing clearly. My family had been bent into something twisted and cruel, and I could not stand still another second. But action doesn't always begin with slamming a table or shouting. It begins with silence, a silence thick enough to hear your own life-changing direction. I waited until Mia fell asleep in her small bedroom, her steady breathing dissolving into the darkness. I waited until Damien stepped out of the house. He said he was going to a friend's place to watch the game, then slammed the door and drove off like someone who never thought he'd have to pay for anything. And when it was only Lily and me in the house, so quiet we could hear the Bayfield wind slipping through the pines outside the porch, I knew it was time to touch the truth my daughter had been hiding for so long. Lily placed a thin blanket over Mia in the bedroom and stepped out, closing the door so gently it was as if even the hinge could startle the child. I sat there, my hands clasped together, waiting for Lily to say something. Anything. But she didn't speak. She just stood a few steps away from me, her left hand gripping her right wrist, an old habit of hers. As a child, whenever she was anxious, she would unconsciously squeeze her hands like that. I looked down at Lily's wrist, a bruise, a streak running from the soft spot under her thumb, nearly to the crease of her forearm. It couldn't be from bumping into a counter. It couldn't be from dropping a bowl. It was the mark of force from someone's hand. "Lily," I called softly, like someone placing a hand on a door about to shatter. "Your wrist? Who did that?" She jolted, a small movement, but so quick and frightened that it made my chest hurt. No one did. I just bumped into the kitchen shelf, Dad." "Lily," I repeated, lowering my voice a notch, but still no louder than a breath. "I'm not asking to blame you. I'm asking to understand." She stepped back, then another step, as if the question itself could hurt her. Her eyes dropped, avoiding mine. I didn't move closer. I knew if I did, she would freeze. People talk about being trapped in an abusive relationship like it's simple, but no one understands that the fear isn't in the action. It's in the mind, in the memories, in the constant need to predict the abuser's emotions just to stay safe. "Lily," I sighed, "do you know how useless I feel as a man when I see you like this?" Lily suddenly raised her hand to her mouth, as if someone had just crushed the air out of her. Then she burst into tears, not the soft, trembling kind, but the kind that collapses, like a dam that's held too long and finally gives way. She sank into a chair, hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. I sat beside her, afraid to touch her, afraid that even my touch might hurt her more. And then, in the moment between two broken sobs, she spoke words that made my blood go cold and boil at the same time. "Dad, there was a time. He made me stand facing the wall for almost an hour because I forgot to turn off the oven. One night, he locked the kitchen door and made me eat leftovers he had intentionally set aside, saying it was a lesson for a wife who doesn't appreciate things. One night, he yanked the phone from my hand and threw it on the floor, just because I texted to ask if you were doing okay." Lily spoke softly, but every word was like a blade cutting through the silence she'd been trapped in for 3 years. "He said if I told anyone, I would lose Mia forever." I sat beside her, not daring to touch her, not because I feared her, but because I feared myself. Because if I placed a hand on her shoulder, I knew my anger would break loose. "Dad," her voice trembled, "you don't understand. You don't see how wrong I've been." "Wrong?" I frowned. What were you wrong about? I I signed papers. I sat up straight. My eyes left her wrist and fixed on her tear-streaked face. What papers? She swallowed her tears, trying to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. Finally, after a few sharp breaths, she opened her mouth. Medical authorization papers. That's what he said, but later I realized they weren't. At the time, I had postpartum depression. I felt cold air from the window spilled down my spine. Explain. Lily nodded faintly, eyes like someone waking up in a dark room with no light. Dad, do you remember when I had Mia? After that, I was bad. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was always scared. The doctor put me on sertraline and quetiapine. High doses. I was in and out. I didn't know days, didn't know hours. I only knew Mia cried, and I was scared I wasn't good enough to be her mom. Hearing her say that squeezed my heart tight. I wasn't there with her then. 10 years on the other side of the world. I never saw those tears, but from what I'd heard later, I knew she'd endured nights like that. And then, I asked, Damien said it was just a document confirming that if I relapsed, he had the right to take me to the hospital. He said it was to protect Mia. I believed him. She let out a tiny laugh, but it wasn't a laugh. It was something breaking. But Dad, you know what? The day I fully recovered after the medication, I couldn't find the copy anywhere. When I asked, Damien said I'd signed it already. No need to look at it again. When I asked. Again later, he got angry. He said I was ungrateful because he'd taken care of me when I was at my weakest. My hands curled into fists on my knees, not to threaten anyone, but to keep myself from breaking something in the room. Where are the papers? Lily stayed silent. Then she stood, walked into the small bedroom, and opened the drawer of an old wooden cabinet. She pulled out a clear zip bag. Inside were photocopied documents. I took them. My eyes scanned line by line, then stopped. My heart thumped hard like a hollow drum in a dark room. Not a medical authorization form, not a healthcare proxy, but a transfer of house ownership, and another, a care contract, binding financially and legally. Date signed, the year Lily gave birth to Mia. Right at the time, she was on the highest doses of sertraline, plus quetiapine. Lily's signature was shaky and thin, slanted, exactly the handwriting of someone fighting depression and medication. Damien's signature was sharp, firm, angled at 20 degrees. The handwriting of someone fully aware. I looked up slowly, parts of my mind moving from shock to pain to the only state I could cling to so I wouldn't explode. The clarity of a man realizing his daughter had been tricked into signing away her life. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, her voice trembling like it might snap. Dad, I don't understand anything. I thought I was signing something for when I had a breakdown. I didn't know it was the house. I really didn't know. I stood, walked to her, and placed my hands on her shoulders lightly, very lightly, as if anything more would turn her into ash. Lily, I said, you didn't do anything wrong. You were at your weakest, not in your right mind, and you were coerced. This is not your fault. She looked up, her red, desperate eyes shining with fear. Dad, then what do I do? Can I get the house back? I took a long breath, and I knew. The moment I finished reading those documents, everything changed. I was no longer the father returning after 10 years away just to visit his child and grandchild. I became the only man standing between my daughter and a carefully staged fraud built from Damien's cruelty. And I swore on all the years I'd lost, that he would regret choosing Lily as his victim. He knew exactly what he was doing. He used the moment she was weakest. A chill spread from the base of my skull to my lower back. I asked, Lily, have you ever signed multiple versions of a signature? Your handshaking, for instance? She didn't answer immediately. A flicker of panic flashed across her face, like a memory she didn't want to touch, rising to the surface. I recognized that look, the look of someone who had been guided, someone who had been handed a pen when her mind wasn't fully her own. And in that instant, I understood. What Lily had admitted was only the surface, the submerged part of the iceberg. The signatures, the forms, the medical files exploited, might have been happening far longer than I imagined. The next morning, when the sun had just pulled itself over the San Juan Range, and its faint light spilled across the snow that hadn't yet melted from the night before, I drove the SUV toward Farmington. Lily was still asleep, Mia hugging her little pillow beside her mother, and I knew I couldn't wait another day. The papers in the zip bag from last night had said too much, and at the same time, not enough. I needed records. I needed professional evidence. I needed someone outside this vortex of pain to confirm for me that what Lily was going through wasn't imagined. San Juan Regional Medical Center appeared after the long curve, the low white building with pines lining the entrance, the familiar scent of disinfectant, the smell I once hated because it reminded me of the days my wife lay in the ICU, now felt like the only anchor telling me I was doing the right thing. I explained at the reception desk that I was Lily Marlowe's biological father, handling an emergency involving risk of abuse and misuse of legal documents. I presented Lily's birth certificate along with an emergency family access form, the only thing allowing family to view records when the patient cannot protect herself. After verifying, they led me to the office of Dr. Helena Navarro, the psychiatrist who treated Lily during her postpartum period. I'd heard Lily mention this name, but only in scattered, guilt-filled, frightened fragments. The door closed behind me. Dr. Navarro, a woman in her 40s, compact build, bright but slightly sad eyes, invited me to sit. She looked at me for a moment before saying, "Mr. Marlowe, before I can open Lily's records, please tell me what's happening," I told her. I didn't leave anything out. I didn't soften anything. I didn't color it. The bruises, the papers Lily signed while saying her mind was foggy. Only after I finished did Dr. Navarro enter the passcode to open Lily's file in the system. The light from the screen reflected on her glasses. A light that told me my daughter's life was about to be translated into the coldest truth. She reviewed the file for a while, then turned to me, her voice soft but firm. "Mr. Marlowe, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but any legal documents Lily signed during this period are invalid." I felt my heart stop half a beat. "Doctor, can you explain more clearly?" She turned the screen so I could see. A chart appeared. The day Lily gave birth to Mia. The day Lily was admitted for postpartum disorder. The day sertraline was prescribed. The day quetiapine was added. And finally, the day the dosage was increased. Dr. Navarro pointed to the significant timeline. Here, this is when Lily's cognitive capacity was at its lowest. Her finger moved down to the bottom of the record, her voice deepening. At this dosage, sertraline and quetiapine cause severe impairment in decision-making, time perception, even distinguishing real memories from false ones. My stomach twisted. "You mean my daughter didn't know what she was signing?" "Not just didn't know," she said, eyes serious, "but couldn't know. Medically speaking, she had no legal capacity during that time." At that moment, there was a soft knock on the door. A young nurse, her badge reading Alyssa M., stepped in carrying an old stack of files. "Doctor, I found the observation logs from that year. He should see them." Dr. Navarro gestured for her to continue. Alyssa looked at me for a second before speaking with a gentle but tight voice. "I monitored Lily during some of her treatment sessions. Some days she couldn't remember what day it was. Some days she signed the medication chart with her hand shaking so badly her signature looked like someone with Parkinson's. She opened the files, pointing to a wrinkled yellow page. "This is Lily's signature on the 14th. This is the 15th. And that was when I understood. The signature on the house transfer paper that Damien claimed Lily voluntarily signed. It was that trembling signature, the signature of someone who didn't even know where she was. No court will recognize these signatures, Dr. Navarro concluded. If needed, I'm willing to testify. I looked at the two women, strangers who understood my daughter's suffering better than anyone, and a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time returned. Hope. The first hope I'd had since standing at the doorway of the Mill Creek Ridge house and seeing my daughter in that humiliating apron. I requested copies of all records and thanked them. As I stepped out of San Juan Regional Medical Center, the Farmington wind whipped across my face, cold, sharp, and cutting deep. But on the drive back to Bayfield, as the San Juan Mountains rose again in the distance, and the familiar scent of pine drifted through the cracked window, I realized I wasn't cold anymore. In my pocket was something that could save my daughter and change everything. I knew I had just touched the key that would unlock the truth. And from that moment on, I also knew one more thing. Damien Caldwell hadn't just committed a crime. He had signed his own sentence. After leaving San Juan Regional Medical Center with the thick stack of records in my hand, I didn't drive straight back to Bayfield. That same evening, I turned toward Duranga, where the law office my old friend once mentioned was located. Clara Madden, specializing in exploitation of vulnerable adults and unlawful property transfers. Her office was on the second floor of an old brick building on Main Avenue, its glass door etched with the words Madden Law. I stepped inside. Clara, a woman in her early 40s, black hair tied back, eyes sharp as if she had already read my thoughts, stood to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, cold, and without a hint of pretense. Mr. Marlowe, I reviewed the email you sent with your summary. Now show me the rest. I laid the stack of documents on the table. Clara flipped through each page quickly, precisely, like someone who had handled hundreds of similar cases and still never grew numb to the cruelty people inflict on each other. She stopped at the deed transfer page, frowning slightly. "Do you see anything unusual?" I asked. Clara didn't answer immediately. She put on her glasses and leaned in to examine the faint notary seal at the bottom. "Unusual?" "No, Mr. Marlowe." She looked up, her voice cold as steel. "This is not unusual. This is forged." My heartbeat slammed in my chest. Clara rotated the paper, pointing to the registry number. "No notary in Colorado has this identification. I checked directly against the state database. This seal does not exist. The person who stamped it also doesn't. It felt like someone punched me in the ribs. So that means—" Clara nodded, delivering the verdict. "The entire property transfer involving Lily is instantly void. They used a fake notary seal to trick a woman under heavy antidepressant influence. This isn't an error. This is a scheme." She pulled out the caregiver contract, the document Lily was coerced into signing when she couldn't even tell days apart. I had read it multiple times and still couldn't believe someone would do this to a young mother. Clara tapped the line stating, "Repay assistance debt through residential labor." "Do you know what this is?" I shook my head. She answered in a voice stripped of emotion. "This is forced labor to repay a debt they fabricated. It falls under human trafficking charges under federal law." I had to grip the edge of the desk to stay upright. Clara continued, her voice steady, cold, but carrying unmistakable fury. "They kept your daughter confined in her own home for 3 years, forced her to work without pay, under threat of losing custody of her child. This is not just civil wrongdoing. This is federal crime, and we have enough evidence." She pushed the papers back towards me, then opened a blank sheet and drew 4 bullet points. 4 steps, each one like a hammer, being nailed into the legal coffin Damien and the Caldwell family had built for themselves. Step 1, 48-hour ultimatum. We send the Caldwell family a demand letter. Return the house, void all invalid documents, and pay damages. If they're smart, they'll be afraid. She gave a cold smile. But men like Damien are rarely smart. Step 2, civil lawsuit. We file in La Plata County Court. Illegal property transfer, forced labor, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She looked straight at me. They cannot win. Step 3. Report to APS. Once APS gets involved, the state of Colorado launches an investigation. You know what that means? It means the Caldwells can't bury this with money, connections, or threats. Step 4. Public reveal. Clara clasped her hands and leaned back. Damien Caldwell built a reputation as a respectable, hard-working family man in Bayfield. All we have to do is release the right documents to the Durango Herald and the local community boards. Public pressure will choke them faster than any courtroom. Her voice dropped, but sharpened. Trust me, Mr. Marlowe. People who live behind masks fear light more than anything. I sat still for a few seconds. Everything was unfolding quickly, yet with brutal clarity. Clara placed her hand on the folder, saying the most important sentence of the afternoon. If you want to save Lily, this is the only path. I took a deep breath, met her gaze, the gaze of someone who had fought dozens of these battles and had never stepped back. I agree, I said, my voice low and firm. Let's start now. Clara nodded, opened her laptop, and began drafting the ultimatum. The legal war, the war Damien had no idea was rushing toward him, officially began at that moment, and for the first time since setting foot back in Bayfield. I didn't feel powerless anymore. I felt like I was about to do what a father is supposed to do, take back justice for the daughter whose life had been stolen. In the next 2 days, Clara drafted a 48-hour ultimatum and sent it directly to Damien Caldwell through his work email, his personal email, and a hard copy delivered by certified mail with signature required. She deliberately didn't send it to the Caldwell estate, because in cases like this, if you don't send it to the exact individual responsible, he will hide behind the excuse of not receiving valid notice. Clara left him no escape. The Caldwell family held a golden image in the Colorado Springs area. Neighbors praised their manners, they sat front row at every charity fundraiser, and the local paper once called them Colorado Springs Model Family. After receiving the ultimatum, he rushed back to hide behind the shadow of his family's influence, the place he always ran to whenever things started to crack. That weekend, Clara said, "We go to Colorado Springs, not to beg, to show them what we have." We drove nearly 5 hours, and Colorado Springs at night carried a cold that slipped through every layer of clothing, but even that cold couldn't compare to what I felt when Clara's car turned onto the stone-paved road leading to the Caldwell estate. Tall rows of pines stood on both sides like sleepless sentries, and the small golden lights of the path lamps only highlighted the suffocating atmosphere the Caldwell family tried so hard to hide. Clara turned off the engine. She closed her file case, lifted her head to look at me, her eyes sharp but steady. "Stay calm. We only need the truth." I nodded slightly. From this point on, there was no turning back. The mansion's main door opened with a faint creak, and we stepped into a grand foyer filled with crystal light. A thick red carpet stretched from the entrance to the winding staircase, and the air carried the smell of old wood and strong liquor, the scent of families wealthy enough to mistake power for law. Damien appeared from the left hallway, whiskey glass swinging in his hand. The moment he saw me, his eyes narrowed, and a smirk lifted the corner of his mouth. Intentional, mocking, and the first thing out of his mouth landed like a slap. "What does the old woodshop guy want? Money?" I didn't speak. Clara stepped forward, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the room. "We're here to present what happened, in chronological order." She set the case on the stone table, clicked it open with a crisp snap, and laid the documents across from the 3 Caldwells, seated on the expensive leather sofa. First, Clara pointed at the clearly printed timeline, Lily's medication log. This is the day Lily's dosage was increased. This is also the day she signed the papers. In this state, she had no legal capacity to sign anything. Mrs. Caldwell let out a faint laugh, just enough to show her arrogance. "Lily's mental issues aren't our concern. It only proves she was..." Weak. Clara flipped to the second packet. Fake notary. The notary seal the Caldwells used. This notary identification has been suspended since 2019. The seal you used is invalid. The air in the foyer dipped a beat, even though they pretended not to notice. Clara moved to the third packet, Lily's inconsistent signatures. She placed the two versions side by side, one steady, one trembling, skewed. This is the signature of someone under medication influence, and here is the forensic report confirming it. Mr. Caldwell crossed his arms, tilted his head, and asked, "So what do you want?" Clara didn't change her tone. 48 hours to voluntarily return the property, void all contracts, and issue a public apology. Damien burst out laughing, a loud, arrogant sound filling the room. Not a chance. Not in 48 hours, not ever. Mrs. Caldwell nodded, her eyes cold enough that I could feel the chill from across the room. Clara closed the case and locked it neatly. She smiled, a thin, sharp smile, the kind worn by someone who has just watched her opponent willingly step into the trap. Perfect. We walked out of the mansion while the three Caldwells still bathed in their blind confidence, unaware that their refusal had pushed them onto the only road left, the courtroom. Outside, the cold wind slashed across my face like a quiet reminder. The real war had only just begun. Clara opened the car door, speaking softly but firmly enough for me to hear clearly. They chose wrong, and we will see this through. I looked back at the mansion, its lights still, blazing, but I knew, tonight, that light was nothing more than the last pretty shadow of a family on the verge of collapse. I started the engine and drove down the slope. The Colorado Springs night slid past the windows like a strip of dark silk. In that moment, I didn't know how the Caldwells would strike back, but I knew they would, because those who live by control always try to twist the truth before the truth reaches the light, and just as expected, they moved first. On Monday morning, when Bayfield's early fog still clung to porches, like a thin dusting of powdered sugar, I was standing inside the small wooden house on the edge of town, the house I lived in before leaving the country, nearly 10 years ago. When I left, I asked Mr. Baker, the neighbor one lot over, to stop by sometimes, unlock the doors, clear the pine needles, keep the place from looking abandoned. After returning, I didn't renovate much. I wanted it to keep the old pine smell, the sun-faded paint, and the quiet I had always considered the last refuge of my life. I checked my phone and saw a flood of messages, from neighbors, from Lily's former co-workers, even from people I didn't know. All of them sent the same link, a long public post from the Caldwell family. Their account wrote, in a voice cold as steel, "Lily Caldwell is currently incapacitated and unable to manage her own finances. She has personal debts, unstable mental health, and is a danger to a young child. The Caldwell family is forced to care for Mia for her protection." I read every word, feeling as if someone had crushed my chest with their bare hands. They wanted to turn the truth into mud. They wanted to turn Lily, the daughter I carried through her first winter, into a useless burden. They wanted to craft a narrative to justify everything they'd done. Clara called me right after, her voice unnervingly calm. "Mr. Marlowe, they are doing exactly what we predicted, which means it's time to strike back." I looked toward the San Juan Range, the snow reflecting the pale morning light. A thought rose slowly, sharp as a blade. If they wanted to weaponize free speech to smear her, then we would use the truth to rip off their masks. That evening I drove to 1120 Mill Creek Ridge, the house I once believed would be filled with happiness, with laughter, with the love I had for my daughter and the man she chose. But now, it was the place holding the truth. Lily never had the strength to speak out loud. And in the silence of that house, I understood that to save her, I had to face what she'd been forced to hide. Not through her words, but through evidence that speaks. Evidence no one can deny or twist. The truth, this time, needed to stand with us. I knew exactly where to place the camera. Because I had once bought this house and given it to my daughter, I knew the exact corner behind the red Craftsman cabinet, the spot where Damien always stood to take off his boots and hang his coat after work. That angle faced the garage path Lily had to walk through to reach the kitchen. I installed a mini camera that didn't need wiring, motion-activated recording only. Clara asked when I sent her the setup, "Are you sure? Once we have this footage, there's no going back?" I answered, "My daughter is worth more than silence." And just as I expected. Only 3 nights later, the camera captured what Lily's words could never fully describe. Damien drunk. Damien kicking a stainless steel trash bin hard enough to dent it. Damien throwing his hard hat at the wall. Damien shouting, "Useless, bitch! If you don't sign, I'll force you. You are property of this family." Every echo in that garage was a knife ripping through my memories. The memories of Lily as a child, pigtails bouncing as she ran through the spring sunlight of Mill Creek, holding a red kite. I watched the entire clip with my hands shaking. Not from fear, from the brutality of the truth. My daughter had lived in hell while I believed I had given her a safe home. Clara said only one sentence. "We now have what they cannot spin. Images, audio, truth." That night we posted the clip on an anonymous account. No name, no picture. Just one line. "This is how Damien Caldwell treats women in his family." In under 1 hour, the clip spread across Bayfield. 2 hours later, Durango started sharing it. By the next day, all of Colorado Springs was talking. A standout comment appeared from someone who once worked with Damien. "I know him. This is the real him." Then others began questioning. Why would a clip like this exist if Lily was truly a danger to a child? The Caldwell's story doesn't add up. It looks like they're hiding something. The noise on social media started to rise. Not the noise of a curious crowd, but the noise of a community beginning to wake up to a truth that had been twisted for too long. I turned off my phone, stepped onto the porch, and stared at the dark rows of pine trees against the cold night. The highland wind slid under my collar, carrying the feeling of something new beginning. The Caldwell family had thrown mud, but the truth had begun to speak. After the clip exploded online, following Clara's advice, Lily and Mia temporarily moved in with me, into the house I'd always considered my final refuge. Bayfield snow fell like shredded white paper dropped from the gray sky. I was cleaning the kitchen when the bedroom door cracked open. Mia stepped out, holding a worn stuffed bear. She stared at me for a long moment, her dark brown eyes frightened, as if trying to guess whether I was a safe person or not. Then she spoke in a voice softer than breath. "Daddy Damien said Mommy is a slave?" I froze, nailed to the floor, not because of the word slave, but because of how she said it. No anger, no resentment, just a child repeating what she'd heard, while hiding behind the stairs, not understanding why every time she heard that word, her mother's heart clenched like it was being crushed. I knelt and opened my arms. Mia rushed into my chest, holding tight as if afraid she would be dragged away. Lily appeared behind her, eyes red, hands shaking as she pulled her thin coat tighter. She didn't say a word, but just looking at her eyes, I knew she had endured too much. That night, I added extra locks, prepared a room for the 2 of them, and left them in peace. Mia fell asleep first, while Lily lay still in the dark for a long, long time before I heard a choked breath escape her. Near midnight, I had just turned off the stove and reached for the curtains when the porch light snapped on. Then a scream tore through the quiet night. Damien. He stood at the steps like a man unhinged, coat blown open by the wind, collar soaked in liquor, eyes bloodshot. The smell of whiskey rolled off him so strong it felt like standing behind a dive bar at 3 a.m. He screamed, his throat raw. "Where's Lily? Where the hell did you hide her? You useless old sack. You parasite. Who the hell do you think you are? Some broke workshop geezer trying to lecture me?" As he yelled, he grabbed a ceramic flower pot from the steps and hurled it at my door. The shattering clay cracked the night like a gunshot in the valley. 2 neighbors' lights flicked on, then another. 3 windows lit up in sequence like a stage effect, the whole street waking at once. A woman cracked open her door. A man pulled aside his curtain. Then phones appeared. 1, 2, 3. The entire block began recording. Damien didn't realize, or was too far gone to care, that every insult, every stumble, every time he yanked at my door was being captured from multiple angles, like a chaotic live stream. He roared, "You kidnapped my wife! You destroyed my family! You turned her against us! Where were you when she was depressed? In Qatar counting money? You're a failure of a man." Then he jabbed a finger at my face, his mouth twisting. "No one respects you. No daughter needs a father like you." I stood still, didn't step forward, didn't step back, just looked at him, my eyes cold as the ice floating on the Animas River at the end of January. A strong gust of wind blew through, snow falling in a sudden sheet of white, like a curtain forcing the street to witness this scene more clearly. And in that chaotic moment, under the glow of phone flashlights shining on his distorted face, everyone understood. Damien Caldwell had exposed himself completely, without me saying a single word. Police arrived after 8 minutes. They pulled him away, struggling to keep him upright as the alcohol dragged him down. An officer asked me if I wanted to file for an emergency restraining order. I hadn't answered yet when my phone buzzed. Clara, her voice calm but sharp as a freshly honed blade. "I just saw the clip your neighbor posted. Perfect. Mr. Marlowe, we'll file for the restraining order tonight." I took a long breath. The cold wind slid down my collar like a thin knife. Tonight, Lily had reached the bottom of her fear, but it was also tonight that our battle entered a completely new chapter, a chapter the Caldwells would never be ready for. The next morning, when the hashtag Justice for Lily spread across all of Bayfield, Clara received an email from one of the donors of the Spring Light Fund, the organization that supports women suffering from domestic abuse. The email had one crucial line: "The Caldwell family will be speaking at tonight's gala as the people who helped Lily overcome her crisis." Clara showed it to me, her eyes flashing with a sharp, blade-like light. "They want to use the spotlight to wash themselves clean," she said. "We'll use that same spotlight to expose the truth." I stayed silent, not because I hesitated, but because I knew. This would be the moment all of Colorado would see who they truly were. Clara prepared the USB. I prepared myself. That evening we arrived at the street hosting the outdoor gala, where strands of golden lights hung along the storefronts and crystal decorations suspended in the air had never illuminated anything as real as they would tonight. The gala carried a kind of light I'd never seen. Too elegant, too cold, and too fake. Crystal chandeliers hung above like icicles, casting shimmering streaks across the stone pavement, making it easy for people to imagine they were attending a coronation rather than a charity event. The Caldwell family appeared at the center of the main hall, as if they owned the place. Damien wore a midnight blue suit, hair slicked back, the scratches from the night he screamed outside my house conveniently hidden. His parents smiled broadly, shaking hands with wealthy guests as if they had just done something noble for the community. And then I heard it, a sentence as soft as wind, but strong enough to push me to the final edge. "Thanks to us, Lily was saved." A woman in the group asked, "Saved from what?" And Damien, with a voice dripping with self-satisfaction, replied, "From herself. She's weak, can't control her emotions. Our family carries all of it." The sentence fell like cold stone onto a grave. Clara, standing beside me, didn't speak. She simply opened her bag and took out a silver USB. Then she tilted her head and asked softly in a calm, chilling voice, "Ready, Mr. Marlowe?" I nodded. Clara walked to the sound and light booth, said a few words to the technician. He checked the equipment, noticed her name on the legal representative permit, and nodded like he understood that something significant was about to happen. A moment later, the entire ballroom went dark. The music stopped. Only a single harsh white spotlight remained, shining onto the massive LED screen on stage. The MC hadn't even reacted. When the screen lit up, the first clip, Damien in the Mill Creek Ridge house screaming at Lily. Damien kicking the stainless steel trash bin until it dented, hurling his hard hat at the wall and shouting, "Useless bitch! If you don't sign, I'll force you. You are property of this family." His voice echoed through the luxurious venue. No one could believe what they were seeing. Some people covered their mouths. A woman dropped her champagne glass on the carpet. Damien's parents froze. It wasn't over. As that video ended, another image appeared, a scanned record from San Juan Regional Medical Center. Patient is under increased dosage, cognitive impairment likely, not incapacity for legal consent. As those words appeared, it felt as if all air had been sucked out of the ballroom. And finally, the most damning proof. 2 samples of Lily's signature displayed side by side. One normal, one trembling and distorted by medication and pressure. A man in the crowd whispered, "This is coercion. This is forced signing." When the last clip ended, all the lights snapped back on. Damien stood in the middle of the crowd, his face drained white, then flushing red from rage. He screamed, "You're all being fooled. This is staged. That crazy bitch made it up. You bastards." He overturned a champagne table. A glass shattered. People recorded. People backed away. People live-streamed. His parents tried to pull him back, but failed. He jerked free, shouting at hundreds of guests, "We saved her. We did everything for her. She owes us her whole life." And that was the moment everyone understood. The Caldwells hadn't saved anyone. They controlled. They owned. They imprisoned. Phone alerts chimed across the hall. The hashtag Justice for Lily began appearing on everyone's screens. Within under 10 minutes, it was trending across Colorado. Clara received a message. She turned to me and nodded. La Plata County Court saw the clip. They're opening an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow morning. I looked at the wide stage, at Damien collapsing under the lights. Pathetic, terrifying, and fully exposed. In that moment, I knew. Tonight, the first curtain of justice had lifted. The Caldwell empire cracked right in the center of the spotlight. As we left the gala, the Colorado night wind hit my face with a different kind of cold. Not the cold of snow or mountains, but the cold of a man drowning in public humiliation. Damien was dragged out of the hall under a storm of whispers and phone lights. Hashtags Justice for Lily, Caldwell Truth, Protect Mia filled feeds within hours. His name climbed to the top of search trends in both Durango and Colorado Springs. Clara spoke as we walked toward the parking lot, her voice low like wind breaking across a lake. "Be careful, Mr. Marlowe. People who lose face publicly tend to do the stupidest things after dark." That night, I had no idea that public humiliation was only the beginning. The night would bring Damien to my doorstep, in the most literal sense. That night, rain hammered down on Bayfield, as if someone wanted to wash the entire town off the map. The drops struck the tin roof in sharp, cold, steady beats, so rhythmic they made me think of the hour chimes on the sand timers at the guitar workshop. Each sound a pulse, each pulse a reminder that something was about to end. Lily and Mia were asleep in the back room. After the gala, I kept them here because I knew the more desperate Damien became, the more dangerous he would be. I had locked the doors, checked every window, and activated the porch camera. Not out of fear, but to protect the only 2 people I had left in this life. I had just set my phone on the table when the porch light snapped on. A figure, stumbling, soaked from head to toe. I thought it was a neighbor needing help in the storm, but then the figure lifted his head, and I saw Damien Caldwell. His eyes were bloodshot, hair plastered to his forehead, his breath reeking of alcohol mixed with some metallic tang. He stood in my yard with a propane canister in his left hand and a wooden-handled hammer in his right. My heart tightened, not out of fear, but because I understood. This was the moment he destroyed himself. I glanced toward the hallway. Lily's door barely closed, her nightlight casting a soft strip of yellow across the floor. I had to keep everything quiet. One noise, one cry from Mia, and this would spiral beyond control. Rain whipped across my face as I stepped out onto the porch. He saw me and screamed, like something no longer human. "You old bastard! You took everything from me. Give it all back." He raised the propane canister, his voice cracking in the rain. "I'll burn it. Burn everything. Let's see what you have left." A drunk man holding a propane canister, an older man standing a few meters away. This wasn't a fistfight. It was a time bomb, and only time could take him down. Rage rose in my throat, but years of managing warehouses and woodshops in Qatar taught me one thing. Out-of-control men don't fear fists. They fear the calm of the person in front of them. I eased backward, not turning my back, not closing the door. Safe distance, 10 to 12 meters, enough to avoid any drunken lunge. I grabbed my phone, stepping lightly so the hinges wouldn't creak. I could not let Lily and Mia see this. Fear kills people from the inside faster than anything. I dialed 911, keeping my eyes on Damien so he'd think I was still engaging, keeping him from running before officers arrived. The dispatcher's voice came through the rain. 911 described the emergency. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "An abuser is at my home. He is armed. He has a propane canister. I need officers immediately." Outside, Damien kept screaming, hands shaking violently. I knew that kind of shaking, the kind that comes right before collapse. I'd seen dozens of men like that in the Qatar workshop when pushed past their limits. "Mr. Marlowe, maintain distance and stay on the line. Patrol is en route." Distance? I had that. What I needed was time, minutes, just minutes, for the porch camera to capture his face, his voice, the weapons in his hands. I told the dispatcher, "I'll keep him here." Not with strength, with psychology. I took half a step forward, just enough for Damien to think I was engaging, but far enough that he couldn't reach me. "Damien, calm down," I shouted loud and clear, without provoking. Drunks don't understand logic, but they understand confrontation. As long as I didn't run or challenge, he would stay rooted, and he did. Damien staggered forward one step, then stopped, trapped inside his own rage. "Don't pretend to be good. This is all your fault." I kept my voice steady. "Damien, listen, I'm not going anywhere." Just that one sentence. It kept him in place, kept him shouting, kept him right in front of the camera. I saw flashing blue and red lights reflecting at the far end of Mill Creek Ridge. A patrol car was approaching. I added one more line, a time-stalling technique I'd learned after decades of management. "If you want to talk, then say everything. I'm listening." The most dangerous invitation, but also the quietest trap. Damien began twisting open the propane canister cap. The patrol car skidded to the curb, water spraying in arcs under the streetlights. 2 officers stepped out, one male, one female, rainproof jackets darkened by the storm, hands close to their belts, as protocol for an armed suspect. "Sir, put the canister down, now!" the female officer shouted, sharp as a blade. Damien whipped around. His eyes flared like an animal cornered. He screamed at them, "Don't come any closer! I'll light it! I'll burn everything!" He staggered back, slipping on the wet ground, but still clutching the hammer in his right hand, and hugging the propane canister like a bomb. The male officer stepped closer, hands raised to control distance. "Sir, drop the weapon. Drop it." Damien didn't listen. He spun back toward me, roaring until his throat tore. "This is all your fault. Lily is mine. Everything is mine." Then he lunged, Not enough to reach me, but enough for officers to classify it as an attack. "Taser! Taser!" the female officer warned. A blue arc cracked through the rain. Damien jerked violently, his whole body snapping tight, as if struck by a hammer, the hammer clattering onto the concrete with a sharp metallic ring. The propane canister slipped from his hand, rolling with a hollow thud across the wet pavement. He tried to get up, slipping, kicking wildly, reaching for anything to grab. But the male officer surged forward, pinning his arm to the ground, knee locking onto his shoulder in a precise restraining technique. "Stop resisting!" "Put your hands behind your back." The metallic click of handcuffs snapped shut in the dark rain. A sound cold, clean, and crueler than any word spoken. Damien still screamed, almost no longer human. "Lily is mine! As long as I'm breathing, no one takes her from me. You hear me?" The female officer pressed his head down, one hand securing the propane canister lid to ensure no leak. "You're done, sir. It's over." He kept thrashing, but the strength had drained out of him, washed away by liquor, by the taser, and by raw desperation. Finally, he collapsed flat against the concrete, his breath ragged, the rain mixing with tears or sweat, running down the steps of my home. And I knew. Tonight was the night he signed his own sentence. Those recordings would later become a critical part of the case against him. About 3 months after the gala, La Plata County was covered in a layer of early sunlight, thin as mist, that pale glow unique to the beginning of summer in the Colorado mountains, when the mornings were still cold even though the sun was already high. On the courthouse steps, I stood watching the first rays of light strike the cold gray granite, feeling as if I were stepping into a room where all warmth had been drained long ago. People from Bayfield and Durango gathered in small clusters, their eyes fixed on the main entrance, where the Caldwell family walked in with a fading remnant of the arrogance they once carried. Damien walked in the middle, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of a black coat, his collar raised to hide the face that had collapsed since the night he was arrested. 2 officers flanked him, and that image made me realize that everything in the past few months had brought him to this day exactly the way justice intended. Claire appeared behind me, holding a thick case file clipped tight with a black metal clasp. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her hair tied low, her eyes sharp like a spotlight aimed straight at her opponent's weakest point. "Mr. Marlowe," she said, her voice low and steady, "today the ruling will fall on the side of the truth. You only need to stay calm. The rest, leave to me." I nodded, saying nothing. I knew she was right, and I knew my silence was the strongest statement I could make. Courtroom 3 opened, the gallery nearly full. White light from the tall windows washed across the faces inside, reflecting tension, doubt, anticipation. The smell of old oak benches mixed with paper and the ink of the clerk's forms, the unmistakable atmosphere anyone who has ever faced justice can never forget. Judge Evelyn Hart, a woman with brown-streaked silver hair and eyes stern but fair, entered. The room rose. Court is now in session. The gavel struck, sharp, echoing each beat a cold ripple through the chamber. Clara stood first. She opened the case file, pulled out a stack of numbered documents, and placed them on the evidence table as if laying down stones to rebuild Lily's life. "Your Honor," Clara began, her voice clear, resonant, each word cutting through the room like a polished blade. "We will present all evidence in strict legal order and in chronological sequence, the very thing the Caldwell family has repeatedly distorted." The Caldwells hissed under their breath, but Clara acted as if she hadn't heard a thing. She pressed a button. The big screen lit up. 1, Lily's medication logs. The timeline appeared. Mia's birth, Lily's hospitalization, the increase in sertraline and quetiapine, the nurse's notes, severe tremor, disoriented, cannot recall date. 2, the video of Damien insulting her, smashing the garage. Damien's voice filled the courtroom. "You are property of this family. When I say sign, you sign. Some people in the gallery held their breath. Some shivered. 3. The signature comparison before and after the dosage increase. Lily's healthy signature when unmedicated. Lily's trembling, skewed, broken line from the period she was forced to sign. 4. The fake notary seal. Clara rotated the document on the screen. This registration number has not existed in the Colorado notary system since the year 2019. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Judge Hart raised a hand for silence. Clara finished the first phase of presentation in a low-weighted voice. Your Honor, this evidence shows not only deception, it proves the most critical point. At the time Lily signed these documents, she did not have the legal capacity to understand what she was signing. A chair shifted in the witness row. Dr. Helena Navarro stood. Dr. Navarro stepped onto the stand, small in frame but steady, eyes gentle yet firm in their dark centers, the eyes of someone who has witnessed too many women fall into the abyss after childbirth. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore in, then looked toward Lily, sitting in the back row, holding my hand tightly. When she turned back to the judge, her voice didn't waver once. Your Honor, at the time Lily signed the documents regarding the house transfer and the caregiver contract, she was in severe postpartum crisis. With the levels of sertraline and quetiapine she was on, her cognitive abilities were significantly impaired. She could not distinguish right from wrong, could not make legal judgments, and could not comprehend the content of any document. Judge Hart tilted her head. Dr. Navarro, you mean... Dr. Navarro took a short breath and delivered the sentence that froze the courtroom in absolute silence. Lily could not legally sign any document during that time. No one spoke. No one even dared breathe. That sentence, brief, precise, sharp as a sword, cleaved apart the entire Caldwell argument. Their attorney shot up to object, but the judge's voice cut through like struck steel. Objection overruled. The hearing dragged on for another hour, but the outcome had already been sealed the moment Dr. Navarro's words fell. Judge Hart gathered the files, set down her pen, and looked at both sides, not with coldness, but with the eyes of someone who understood exactly how much Lily had suffered over those 3 years. She struck the gavel. The La Plata County Court rules as follows. Based on medical evidence, video evidence, falsified notary records, and all relevant legal factors. The Caldwell family held their breath. Lily gripped my hand, trembling like she had the first winter she learned to walk. The judge read each line slowly, clearly. 1. All house transfer documents, caregiver contracts, and any papers signed under impaired legal capacity are hereby voided. 2. Full ownership of the house is returned to Lily Marlowe. 3. A 5-year restraining order is issued against Damien Caldwell, covering Lily's home, her workplace, Mia's school, and any public event where she is present. 4. All files on Damien Caldwell are referred for criminal investigation, including fraud, threats, forced labor, and attempted arson. The gavel struck a final time. Bang! The exact point of impact echoed through the oak walls, like the sound of my heart beginning to beat again after months of being crushed. Damien shot up, screaming, "No, no, it's all her fault. It's that old man's fault. You don't understand anything." 2 officers grabbed him by the arms and dragged him out. He kicked, thrashed, shouted, but every sound dissolved into a cheap echo inside a room that had chosen to stand with the truth. I turned toward Lily. She didn't cry. She simply breathed, a long, deep breath, like someone who had just been pulled from underwater after almost drowning. And for the first time since I returned to Bayfield, my daughter's eyes had her own life in them again. No more darkness, no more fear, only hope. Nearly 1 year after I returned to America, Durango's sunlight took took on a strange quality. Not golden, not warm, but so bright that no wrongdoing could hide in the shadows anymore. Because the case involved cross-state offenses and coercive acts containing elements of human trafficking, the file was referred to federal court under Title 18 USC. I held Lily's hand as we climbed the steps of the federal courthouse, where the fate of the Caldwell family would be decided, not by shouting, but by the purity of truth. Reporters lined both sides, cameras flashed non-stop. One journalist whispered, "Today might be the end of the Caldwells." Lily shivered slightly. I squeezed her hand and said, "You just stand tall. Justice will handle the rest." The federal courtroom was much larger than any county courtroom. 4 towering glass windows poured white light over the wooden benches, making everything so clear that no lie could survive under it. Damien was escorted in first. I'd seen men lose everything before, but I had never seen anyone fall apart as fast as he did. His hair was a mess, patchy stubble covered his jaw, and his eyes were red from sleepless nights, or from realizing there was nowhere left to hide. His parents, the Caldwells, entered after him. No more luxury, no more superiority, only the trembling of people who knew they were about to pay not just for their son's crimes, but for their own greed. Judge Robert Kingsley entered, a straightforward man who seemed to look through skin and into the deepest layer of truth. Court is now in session. The gavel fell. The federal prosecutor rose and opened a file nearly a hand thick. Defendant Damien Caldwell is held accountable for the following charges: fraud involving property and the use of signatures obtained from an individual lacking legal capacity; domestic abuse; coercive control, threats and psychological domination; attempted arson using a propane canister, endangering multiple individuals; tampering with and falsifying a notary seal. Each charge was read like a funeral bell. I looked at Lily. She did not cry. The calm on her face made me prouder than anything in my life. Damien was the opposite. He shook, mouth opening as if to speak, but his attorney simply shook his head. There were no words left that could save him. Judge Kingsley stared directly at Damien, his voice lowering. Defendant Damien Caldwell, with the overwhelming evidence provided by the prosecution and the testimony of victim Lily Marlowe, along with medical witnesses. He paused. The whole room held its breath. This court sentences you to 12 years in Colorado State Penitentiary, no parole for the first 8 years. The gavel struck, sharp, cold, merciless. Damien shot up. "No, no, Lily lied. She lied to all of you. 2 deputies forced him back down. He screamed, but his screams sounded like the breaking of a life. The judge turned to Damien's parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, the court finds that you not only concealed wrongdoing, but were complicit in coercing Lily into signing unlawful documents. The court has reviewed internal transfers and emails demonstrating your participation in financial deception and psychological pressure." Their faces went white. "This court orders a civil penalty of $1,100,000, payable within 12 months. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. $1,100,000. It was a verdict designed to strip away every illusion of their power. Mrs. Caldwell burst into tears. We just wanted to protect our family," the judge replied, his voice cold. "By destroying another family?" She collapsed. No one defended her. The prosecutor rose. "Based on the court's findings, we request immediate freezing of all accounts connected to the case." The judge nodded. "Approved." Court officers moved instantly with seizure papers. Part of the Caldwell estate frozen. 2 real estate projects in Durango and Cortez seized. A Cadillac Escalade SUV repossessed. Mrs. Caldwell's investment assets frozen until the full penalty is paid. Cameras crackled. News outlets pushed alerts. Caldwell collapse. Durango family empire falls in landmark abuse and fraud case. The press called it the Caldwell collapse, and the phrase spread across Colorado faster than high country wind. I watched it all and felt no triumph, only release. Release like someone had finally lifted a 10-year stone off my chest. The judge closed the sentencing with a line that froze the courtroom in place. The Caldwell family believed reputation and money could bend the law, but the law bows to no one except the truth. The gavel struck. Bang! The final fall of the Caldwell empire. Damien was escorted out, head down. He didn't look at Lily, didn't look at anyone. Maybe for the first time in his life, he had no one left to blame. His parents stood there as if their bones had been removed. No more power, no more status. Only the bare truth. They had done this to themselves. When we stepped out onto the courthouse steps, Durango's sunlight seemed brighter. Not joyful, not warm, but the kind of light that comes with a new day. A day where darkness no longer has a place to cling. Lily stood in it, her eyes shining but without tears. "Dad," she whispered, "I thought I died in my old life." I brushed a tear from the corner of her eye. "You didn't die. You were only buried for a while. Today, you dug yourself out." I looked at Mia, those clearest eyes in the world, and I knew one thing: the lives of 3 generations of my family were about to turn to the cleanest page yet. That spring came to Bayfield slowly, as if nature itself understood that the house on the hill at Mill Creek Ridge needed time to recover after months of being strangled by darkness. The last snow melted into bright streaks along the wooden eaves, dripping into cracks and disappearing into the warming Colorado soil. I stood at the doorway, my hand resting on the newly sanded pine boards, the very wood I had chosen hauled home, cut, joined, and installed myself. The scent of fresh timber mixed with the faint resin in the breeze, making me feel as if the house was learning to breathe again. The compensation from the Caldwells, combined with the $1.4 million I brought back from Qatar after years of managing warehouses and lumber yards in the desert, was enough for me to do something I never imagined I'd one day have the chance to do: rebuild my family's life from the foundation up. The house at 1120 Mill Creek Ridge had once been a rough gem. I bought it the spring Lily turned 22, when she had just married Damien, and believed she'd chosen a good man. Back then, I had no idea how twisted her life would become in the years that followed. Now the house was completely different. I replaced the entire floor with Colorado red oak, soft-grained wood that whispers when you walk on it, unlike the heavy dullness of manufactured planks. I reinstalled the whole radiant heat system, lined with sound insulation so winter would never again bring that bone-biting cold through all the layers of socks. The living room was newly painted. Lily chose a soft beige, while Mia picked a pale blue for her own room. The kitchen got new cabinets, warm gold-flecked granite countertops shining gently under pendant lights. Everything was done slowly, carefully, patiently, the way a father tries to mend the wounds in his daughter's life with his own hands. One morning, while I tightened the last hinge on a cabinet door, Lily stood in the doorway holding a cup of hot coffee, her hair loose over her shoulders, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen for a long time. "Dad, the house is really beautiful," she said, her voice soft as a breath. I looked around, the morning light on the floorboards, the freshly painted walls, the frames waiting to be hung. "It's not beautiful, sweetheart," I said. "It's alive again." Lily smiled, a real smile. One late afternoon in March, Lily came into my workroom while I was sorting the repair invoices. She placed a sheet of paper on the table, her hand trembling a little, but her eyes bright and steady. I looked down. Application for Master of Social Work, Fort Lewis College. I looked up. Lily pressed her lips together, then said, "I want to study, so I can help people who've been through what I did. I want them to know they're not alone." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm enough to tighten my chest. I stood and wrapped my arms around her, as if letting go would send her back into the darkness I had spent a lifetime trying to pull her out of. "You've walked through a very deep place, Lily," I said, "but you didn't let it define you. I'm proud. More than anything." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm alive today. Because of you." I closed my eyes. The desert years, the nights in the lumber warehouse, the sound of saws, the industrial fans, the months spent sending money home, not knowing her soul was being stripped away. All of it surged up and then dissolved. Mia now ran across the house with the carefree joy a 4-year-old should have. She no longer flinched at a closing door, no longer hid in corners when adults walked into a room, no longer feared the dark. One evening, as I carried a box out to the garage, Mia ran out and hugged my leg. "Grandpa, Grandpa, I drew our house." I bent down to look. The drawing was messy, but to me it was perfect. 3 people, me, Lily, and Mia, standing in front of the house marked 1120, beside a tiny newly sprouted tree. I asked, "What's this tree, sweetheart?" Mia tilted her head. "A tree, so we can all grow together." I thought my heart might stop right there. The day the house was officially finished, I brought home a small red pine sapling, its roots wrapped in a black nursery bag, about 1/2 meter tall. I set it right in front of the porch. A light breeze fluttered its needles like a greeting. Lily stepped out. "Dad, why are you planting that tree?" I looked at the young trunk, scooping soil. "So it can stand here, grow with you and Mia, and remind us that no one has the right to hurt either of you, ever again." Mia held the watering can. Lily kept the sapling straight, and I packed the last layer of soil. When we were done, the 3 of us stood quietly, looking at that small but stubbornly alive tree. The wind from the San Juan Range blew cold, but the porch felt strangely warm. That evening, as the sun cast red streaks over the peaks, and the sapling's shadow stretched long across the ground, I sat on the steps and looked at the house I had spent my life trying to protect. I remembered Qatar, the days standing in the lumber yard, marking crate codes, hauling heavy boards under 46-degree heat, the nights when desert winds rattled the containers and kept me awake, the tiny dreams I swallowed just to keep going, all of it so I could one day sit here at 1120 Mill Creek Ridge, with my daughter and granddaughter within reach. I whispered to myself, I left Qatar with $1.4 million, but the most valuable thing I brought home was my family. Some stories don't end with victory, but with a long final breath when a man realizes he has walked the whole broken road and now stands on the ground that truly belongs to him. My story, from Lily's bruises, Mia's tears, the La Plata court, the blazing Lumiere Gala, to the moment we planted the red pine in front of 1120 Mill Creek Ridge, is not a story about revenge. It is a story about reclaiming what should have belonged to my family all along. And if you have walked with me all the way here to this very line, it means you understand that pain doesn't always come from strangers on the street, but from the ones we loved most, and justice sometimes is not loud. It arrives in silence, step by step, until it stands tall like the red pine at my porch. I want to thank you, the one who has listened to this journey from beginning to end. Please leave and follow so I know you're still here, still believing that truth will always win.